Hi, I'm Brian Moran, founder of Government CIO. Welcome to Government CIO Magazine.
Hi, this is Hillary Wax for Government CIO Magazine. I am interviewing today Robin East, the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Treasury. What are some of the best business practices you have implemented at your department?
We've been focused a lot more recently on improving our governance structure. As I fulfill my obligation to oversee the IT investments for the Treasury, I thought there were some things that we could do to improve the structure of that oversight and make it more effective. So we have put some additional governance structures. We're right now in the process of putting in place a Treasury-wide investment review board, which has existed in the past, but not recently, and that will give us additional oversight opportunities. We're also having more interaction with the bureaus about their investments, more face-to-face discussions as opposed to the typical reporting that's gone on before. In addition to that, in my organization, I am starting the implementation of information and technology infrastructure library best practices, starting with incident management and moving on through change, configuration, and those things, which is another a set of IT best practices that I believe brings us the greatest efficiency just on an operational level. The IRS has recently received certification at Capability Maturity Model Level 3 for their application development. So they're very proud of that. They are the first major federal entity to receive that certification. And they also recently had their ITIL processes reviewed by an independent third party, and they exceeded industry standards there almost across the board.
How have your best business practices helped save money within your department?
Well, I think one thing that we should emphasize first is more successful project outcomes means less cost. So certainly we have a higher level of success rate with our IT implementations, and then the implementation of ITIL best practices always brings efficiencies and allows an organization to operate with less resources. And in these tight budget times, of course, that is a major emphasis for us.
What best business practices have you implemented that you would recommend to other departments?
Well, I think all of the things that I've talked about so far with structured governance, the capability maturity model, which is good application development processes, and ITIL, which is good operational practices on a day-to-day basis, all are industry-wide recognized best practices that will benefit any organization. And another point, too, is that having that consistency and level of maturity across organizations enables us to do more shared services, which is a major point of emphasis in federal government right now, as you know. In addition to that, having enterprise lifecycle planning in place, having good project level governance also ensures that we have more successes with our project life cycles and good outcomes. On time, on schedule, the outcome is what we anticipate it to be. Structured governance, likewise, we talked about that before. In addition to that, though, Treasury is creating an enterprise infrastructure where it responds to data center consolidation, it responds to deduplication of commodity IT, both initiatives that we are driven toward in federal government. But we are consolidating our data centers into existing underutilized space that we have, and that will enable us to build out an infrastructure that will be more consistently but flexibly provisioned so that we can bring in more shared services.
What have been the drivers behind the best business practices that you guys have implemented?
Well, I think that you can't really run an IT operation efficiently without having some of these practices in place. And the question is the level of maturity and how, as you progress along that the continuum of more maturity, you should see increased efficiency. In these days of decreasing budget dollars, as I mentioned before, we just have to find every way we can to operate efficiently, to save money, because the demands for technology are not decreasing with the budgets. They continue to increase. We have new needs every day. And so the only way that we can continue to make progress is to drive efficiency.
How do you develop best business practices?
Well, we're fortunate in that we really don't have to reinvent these particular wheels. There are good methodologies out there. And what we have to do is take those concepts and figure out how best to implement them in each of our operations. Every IT operation starts in a different place. Things like ITIL are really expressed as concepts, and then there are multiple ways to drive the implementation so that it works best in a particular operation, because let's face it, you're never starting from ground zero. You're always running an operation and then trying to improve it while it runs.
How have you been able to leverage best business practices that have been implemented at other agencies?
I think that the federal government-wide initiatives like Shared First, followed closely by portfolio staff, has given us an opportunity to find those sharing opportunities, to find ways to bring more consistency. I think there are efforts going on within the Federal CIO Council that I am one of the chairs of the Management Best Practices Committee, and I know that our efforts are focused on finding ways to identify superior practices in particular agencies and make those available and make people aware that those are happening so that they can be shared and implemented in other places.
What are some of the advantages of the CIO Council for developing and implementing best practices?
Well, I think I mentioned that before, but I think that there are several particular initiatives that we can talk about. One of those is one of our projects within the Federal CIO Council right now that the Management Best Practices Committee has been asked to lead is the creation of a CIOpedia, if you will, and that will be one of the methods that we will use for having one place for CIOs to go to look for what other CIOs might be doing that they can use to improve their own operations.
What other best business practices do you think the government could benefit from that are implemented in private industry?
I think I've mentioned the major ones. Obviously, CMMI, ITIL, having a mature governance process. All of those are things that are widely in use in private industry.
And more specifically, what best business practices have assisted in transforming your department?
Our projects are more consistently successful, as I mentioned before. Our investment health rating went up significantly from 2011 to 2012. So our next step there is to focus more on operational metrics for the things that are not in project mode but in steady state, so that we can make sure that we are adequately measuring the outcomes there and bringing improvements to those investments as well, or deciding that it's time to innovate, as portfolio staff would drive us to do. But another major initiative for us is that I think will be transformational for Treasury is one that I mentioned before. We call it Mobile Treasury, and it hits a number of initiatives, starting with data center consolidation. I said that we're consolidating a number of our IT operations into underutilized data center space. It also drives the re-engineering of our infrastructure. So as we bring those different operations together, we mold them into one enterprise infrastructure that gives us the flexibility to do other things as well as to improve the services that we bring in. We also intend to use that to re-engineer our security architecture so that we have as much flexibility there. We have a highly variable number of security levels that we need within the services that we provide, and so we want to make our architecture more flexible there. We're also looking toward things like mobile apps and potentially also bring your own device. So we want to make sure that we have the wherewithal to make those things available as the demand is there and as it makes sense to achieve the greatest efficiency in provision of technology services for people across the department and for our customers.
And what are some of the best business practices you think need to be implemented as the government moves towards commodity IT?
Well, I think we're talking about the consolidation of commodity IT. We're talking about, these things like running email and running these administrative systems is no longer so different from one area to another or one agency to another. And so I think that what we're already doing to consolidate things at Treasury leads us down that path. We're also looking at next steps within the Management Best Practices Committee. We have a working group that's looking at next steps for portfolio staff and working with the Office of Management and Budget on that. So that's another conversation that I think will take us further down the path and give us some new opportunities.
And finally, I just wanted to give you an opportunity, if one of the questions I asked, and maybe highlight something you wanted to focus on that was going on at Treasury right now. You have an open floor.
Well, my most transformational project I think I've already talked about, and that's Mobile Treasury. I think we're very excited about that here. I think we see so much opportunity there. Our Shared Services Council, which is made up of deputy bureau heads from across Treasury, is supportive of this effort. We went to them a number of months ago and said, if you'll just let us keep our funding in 2013 for those programs as it was in 2012, we will deliver this, and we are. So it's very exciting.